where the whole plug holes for the jig to film the Narcissus on. But Ridley wanted this really clever idea, and that was that as she fired the jets to slow her down, you'd see the refinery going like this past you. And that was great. That looked really good. And for that, we had to build, I think it was wasn't it about 40 foot long? I mean, you remember, it was a blooming great thing. And we had these 8x4 sheets of polystyrene, vac formed, covered them all in plastic kit bits, and with staple. I can remember these staple guns, didn't we? Stapling them onto a framework. Would you believe that those kits that there are actually to make Narcissus? All these kits that you see here, I had to buy in, particularly this one, which was used on Alien. We probably used about 100 of this kit. When I came to build Narcissus, I was actually commissioned recently to build a replica for a collector, and I had to buy all the kits. And I actually found out by doing my homework and looking at all the pictures that I took while on the film, that the number of kits I'd used on the film was 37 different kits we used in the construction of Narcissus. 37 different kits. Racing cars, Super Fortress, Gemini capsule, Leopold gun. Not those two, they're from Star Wars. There's all the tank kits that you see down there. All this stuff here, all these tanks, the Katusha, the Armada, that Armada 2 on the Narcissus, and all those pieces were just plastered all over the whole of the model. And I'd also cut them about to make them more awkward. So, because never realising that 30-something years later somebody was going to come say to me, I want you to build with a Narcissus. And I had to get all these photographs out and blow them all up to the size of the actual thing, which allowed me to make the replica. And it took me about 4 months to do it. And yet the original model took me about 2 weeks.
My friend Dennis said they're looking for people on Alien, so I went along and he said, go see Brian Johnson, which I did. And Brian Johnson just looked at the top 2 pictures on my pack and said, when can you start? And I said, Monday, Monday week. And then I went to Paris for a week to celebrate, and then came back, started 2 weeks later. Yeah. But it was unusual. I was immediately put into one workshop with, it's very hazy actually, the beginning of that, who I was with. There was about 3 of us, and it was quite early pre-production. And we went into one of the ones, studio workshop, where we were building the refinery. And there was, I think, 3 or 4 of us, and we took a tower each. And I remember my tower, I was covering it with red oxide part constructed girders. Yeah, it was. But the studio itself, what a wonderful place to work in. Never forget it. Yeah. Yeah, no, I remember the first instructions were, we had this yellow piece of paper, we had the Ron Cobb drawing, I believe it was, on the wall, and we didn't get a lot of direction to start with, which was interesting and fun, you know. So we used to have, my favourite memory of it was Ridley Scott, who'd just come in every now and again, look at what we were doing. He'd start making sketches on the bench, he'd look at it, he'd go, fucking grey. How about a few more bits sticking out here and a few more sticking out there, and can we try something like this? And then he'd go off again, and we'd just play and just make it up. And it was pretty soon somebody said, look, don't bother copying that picture anymore. And then it was, I believe that's when the carpenters, and the guys started building a frame. I'm not sure there were ever a drawing of exactly what they built, because it was very different to the yellow one, as I remember. Yeah, that with the refinery, we just used to slowly expand. Again, I never saw a picture. I never saw even a few vague sketches, again, just in a pencil on the wood bench that Ridley would make. And it was, I think the only guideline we got, it was, yeah, there were going to be the towers. They had to look like old refineries, and they weren't quite finished, and there was going to be generally towers on top and domes on the bottom. We just went ahead and just spent ages just popping out shopping, buying more Airfix kits, and looking on the floor, finding what we can vacuum form and what we can nick and steal and stick together. And it just grew and grew until Ridley said, stop. Yeah. I remember something, there was one piece he had me working on, which was supposed to be a close-up of the refinery. There was a large, a metre and a half section that was supposed to be a very small corner of the whole thing. And it was, really had me working on that in enormous detail, putting on lots of little block pipes and things. And then after a week and a half or something, he came along and said, oh, I don't know, maybe not, you know. And he started, and we pulled some pieces off that made it a lot flatter. And in the end, didn't use it at all. So, yeah. I remember I was indeed a bit of an outsider, as I've always been a bit, because I never listened to the news on the television. I never watched any soaps, and I had, in some working environments, you know, when you don't do that, you've got nothing to talk about with during the day as you're working. And as I didn't go straight to dinner. I went and had dinner time, and then I would go back to the workshop, and I was reading, I remember Blavatsky at the time. I was working my way through the Secret Doctrine. And I'd go and have dinner, grab a pint of beer and go back to the workshop and read this. And I got a fair bit of stick for that because nobody knew what on earth I was doing. You remind me of Dave Watkins though. I remember I diced with death where I got my... I remember we were getting into shooting wasps with the pea shooter with a piece of EMA tube and a round piece of plasticine. And I became a very good shot. And there was a small war in the workshop one day, and Dave Watkins joined into this, and from a very long way away I hit him, I think, smack in the forehead or in the belly or something, and he was hiding up on top of it was on top of a little office in the corner of the studio, and he was up there trying to shoot back, and I remember I hit him really squarely and he got really angry, he threw a fire extinguisher at me. So yeah.
What kind of work did you do on the Nostromo?
I was partly covering the larger surfaces with all the pipes and the mixers and the bits, and being careful not to use the giveaway tank wheels and the bending pipes. Just covering the surface was lots of it, and that's where I also learned how to use a lathe. I was turning up some of these probes and things that would go on the front and eventually all over the place, sticking out in all directions.
Yeah.
What else was up to? I remember some satellite dishes and some... Yeah, early on there was a bits of just helping Ron with some carpentry, I remember. And then, it was both the detailing and the spraying and I think everybody had to go at everything else, I think, yeah. Yeah, that's how it grew. And that particular special thing about it was that we really were being paid to play, and our imagination was free. We could spend what we wanted, we could stick on what we wanted. Ridley was hardly around, only to, just, I guess I said, walk in and say, fucking great, and go out again. And then I noticed, I saw the script of the second one, and I saw immediately how they'd taken every part of the film that was a success and multiplied it by 10. And it became all completely, conform, all laid out exactly. And I imagined that for the working on the second one, there would have been a bench full of model makers following exact drawings, and it couldn't possibly be as exciting as the first one. So that was actually about time I was moving over here, and when they called me to say, we're going again, we're getting the crew together, come over on Monday. I said, sorry, I'm off to Holland. And they said, you're off to where? Yes. And I turned it down, but I haven't really regretted it. Yeah. I saw the film after, of course, later, and it looked good. It was still good. Yeah. But I'll never forget the first one. Yeah, of course.
I was a photographic school for about a year in Scotland, and I thought, and Star Wars had just appeared. I thought, how can I do it from the Highlands of Scotland? Because I didn't know anyone. And I would go into the local library and look up the who's who and find all the addresses of people in there. Like I found Brian Johnson, and Brian sent this letter. On the letter, it said on the top, alien. And I thought, I didn't pay that any attention. I thought that was the name of his special effects you set up or something. So anyway, I blow in this, Highlander, the black velvet, your jacket looking like the photographer, Rousseau or somebody, or whoever. And he wanted me to do some still photographs of the models and expand them up to black and white to use them for the special effects shots, as opposed to the old 2001 technique. And we did a fair bit of that, and some of the slides I was taking, various other things. And then I got into the model making, and it was just a wonderful time, and that's what started it. And and I know where to live, so I said, Brian, where am I going to sleep? Or I have to find somewhere to sleep. I have to go now. He said, no. He said, there's a dressing room that you can have, and there's a sleeping bag in there. And I stayed in that dressing room for about 3 months. And watching you guys all in your different disciplines and doing stuff, it was just wonderful. I thought, I've arrived, in the sense that this is it. And then, of course, I read the screenplay of Alien. They gave me one of these when I arrived. They said, hey, do you want to read this? And the first thing I did that night when I went up to the dressing room and read the screenplay, and I loved it. I was one of the people who really hooked onto it. I thought the way it was written and everything, it was just a magic immediately about the whole thing. So anyway, Ridley appeared, which finished all these models. Ostensibly, there were 33 shots to achieve on the schedule. And at that time, Nostromo was a military yellow, and everybody loved that look. And the refinery had been finished, and all the shots were more or less finished. And then Ridley appeared from Shepperton, because he'd finished up mainly on the main unit stuff, all the stuff with the actors, too. And everybody realised very quickly that he was going to take a real interest in the models. I think somewhere along the line, Martin Bowe related to the fact that Ridley said, "Do you mind if I do a bit of work on them?" And he came up with the hammers and started knocking pieces off. Everybody was shocked by that because everybody was so intricate. But it was very quickly that Ridley Scott was a force to be reckoned with, I thought. And the fact that he was so approachable and seemed to be, very down to earth. There was no bluff and bluster. And this was highlighted by the fact that one day Guy was doing one of his impersonations of him, and he said, and Ridley was always trying to grasp and sort of, describe verbally what he wanted in terms of pictures. And then he'd get frustrated and he'd just grab the camera and, do it himself. This is, and he said, no, I said, what I want is, I want these umbilicals all hanging, like, aliens, like, Anyway, this was Guy doing this. And he said, no, what I want is these umbilicals and the aliens, like, fucking, hanging here, and Ridley's right behind you. And he took it completely on the chin, and I thought, he's all right. And Guy just kind of, like that, and, vanished for a bit. And, but he's very driven. And, but it was clear to me also, as the thing went on, he was under a lot of pressure, because Alien, the budget, I had read somewhere, because then when I realised I was working on it, I said, what is this thing? I didn't know anything about it. I did a wee bit of research. I think it was only $4 or $5 million. And Star Wars had cost something like 14. So Fox had obviously thought, we'll throw out a cheap horror film. With all respect to you guys at Fox, right? And this is the way the business works. We'll do a quick horror film. But of course Ridley, like before the film started, he went and he did a whole lot of storyboards, basically of the whole film, and they saw this, and the budget doubled. And of course, they got their money's worth, didn't they? And he was such a driven guy. I think everyone knew that it was going to be special, that there's something about this. It was only going to be done once for the first time and never again. Here you had this highly visual director and this bunch of crew members, particularly special effects and arcade model makers, who were all hauling together in the same direction. There weren't any major arguments that I could remember. And everyone just felt, and it was a happy, happy film. It was not like a lot of other shoots that we've maybe experienced. It was just and everyone looked forward to being there. And I remember even when we then came out of the summer of 78 and went into the winter of 78. And of course, then we're shooting in a black velvet environment on the model stage. You come in the dark, you'd be on the shooting stage for 9 or 10 hours in the dark, and then you come out at night, it was dark, so everybody was like a mushroom. So you needed some kind of thing to keep going in that, and it was this very special feel. And the fact that you had a director who was not only a human being, he worked harder than anybody else, if anybody. And of course, once everyone got into the swing, you got the sense that they would die for him. The crew, once they realised how hard he was working, Ridley Scott, and being backed up by Ivor as well, the producer and all that. And then, who was the editor? Rawlings was his name? Terry Rawlings, the editor. And they would work round the clock. They'd come off the shooting stage and then go into a small editing bay at Bray, and they work all night sometimes, trying out different things. And so it was a happy time. Yeah, it was wonderful. It was handmade films. It was, in a sense, wasn't it? It wasn't whereas now they're just number crunching. Yeah.
Which version of Nostromo do you like?
Oh, right. Of all the versions of Nostromo that were actually produced, there was one done. It was military yellow and green, and everyone loved that one, and that was my favourite. And I remember the first sequence. We had a shot which was done by Dennis Lowe, who photographed it, and the Nostromo, the yellow Nostromo, came in overhead, and and the planet artwork was rotating underneath your planet artwork on the dome projection, and then the twin suns came up, and I remember Brian Johnson, and we're sitting in the rushes, the little Bray Studios rushes, and Brian was sitting, with his arms back like this and his feet up, and he said, "I think we've cracked it, lads." Famous last words, because of course Ridley changed everything, but everybody loved that model and the look of it. But the idea was to make everything very dark for the film. Everybody understood what he wanted, but I still think in some ways he made a mistake by not keeping that military, because it gave you a sense, not that it was a military craft, but maybe it had been decommissioned and used, and kind of it was second hand or something. It was a second hand spaceship, and it didn't go into fights anymore, but it was used for that, mining, and but anyway, away it went with everything else as soon as Ridley arrived. And the opening shot of Alien was very simple in the film. It was Alien Planet with the rings going around, and you moved across, and these wonderful letters formed until you got the full alien. It was a wonderful piece of work. And we were in rushes in Bray again, and we were shooting the planet, and it seemed to be getting stuck, this shot. It just was never right, and no one understood why. It was very simple. Just set the camera up on a motor and just move across the artwork, and then it was optically flipped or flopped to come over the other side, the same artwork. So you had a sense of going across this planet and coming up the other side. And Ridley was never happy with this. And he wanted, and Ivor Powell, the associate producer, wonderful guy who was the most human,